Hi chess friends, this is KingsExecutor, and I haven't been doing videos for a long while now, and this is because I'm very busy, and I said that I would quit playing chess in my club. Well, I had to help out, and that I did, and I played white. So this is a serious game, but my opponent was very weak, and we'll see that he will not play very good. But his initial setup is quite frequent, I believe, in lower levels, in club levels. And I played f4, of course. I like dragging my opponents out of their comfort zone, out of their routine, out of their knowledge. I mean, most of my opponents don't really have a lot of theory anyway, but this is what I know and they know zero about it, and I hope to get quick wins out of it. Now, my opponent played 1b6, and I was once asked what to play about the opponent's counter fianchetto, because I want to play g3, as you should know. This is what I recommend on this channel: bishop g2, knight f3, and my bishop on g2 will be very strong, and his bishop on b7 is countering it. And it's not so easy to tell what you should play against it. Well, no matter what my opponent plays, I always try to stick to my setup. I first played d3, and I hoped that he might play knight c6 here. Sorry, let me quit the stop the engine. So, if he would have played knight c6, I would have time for g3, and if bishop here, and there are no discoveries after this. You can push e4, you can play knight f3, but I think e4 is better here, and after something like f5, you could kick the knight. It has to go somewhere, and I think this is okay here. Let's say knight e6. Well, you can still choose what to play. Probably queen e2 is okay here, and after, I don't know, it's not clear to me what black is doing here. You can soon play knight f3, maybe knight d2 first, covering e4, and then knight f3, and then you can castle, and you still have quite the same structure as on the other games I showed you with white. So I played d3 to give my opponent the chance to give me this tempo to play g3. Obviously I cannot play g3 right away, or else, well, actually I could, but say here g3, then bishop here. I don't want to play knight f3, allowing my opponent to double my pawns here. So this is why I played this way. You see, one move can have a lot of thoughts, but if you know the suggestions I made on the other videos when I was playing white, you should know and find these moves very quickly. But you can play differently as well. So g3. Well, if you try to fianchetto one of your bishops, you should be consistent and not play other pawn moves, I believe. But okay. Knight f3, bishop g7, g3. bishop b7, bishop g2, and d6. I castled, and now I achieved my setup I wanted anyway. And my opponent plays a typical club player's move here, h5. After the game, he told me that one of his colleagues also used to play 1f4 with white, and maybe they saw something like this which was better for black. I don't know, but in theory or in general it can't be dangerous in this position. I mean, I in this case would play e4. Why? I mean, I see what black is planning. Let's just take it back. Black is planning maybe to push h4, and if I take this with the knight, he can sacrifice the rook. I get shattered pawns, and he gets to, in the end of the sequence, exchange my very strong king defending bishop here. I would have to retake, and if he pushes e5, there's tension between these pawns, and the queen gets opened to take this pawn here, this doubled pawn here, and my king would be naked. A lot of arrows, but I think you got the point. Well, after h5, I played e4 to first of all not allow the exchange of bishops. After h4 takes, 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 then we have doubled pawns here, double point pawns, and there is no bishop taking here because of the e4 pawn. I mean, even if black would still sacrifice, after that you can play queen e1, control the doubled pawn, you can bring your other knight and replace your exchanged knight and control these crucial squares. There's just no problem for white. This is losing for black if black sacrifices on h4. So e6, and you see white has already castled. White is ahead in development. We have 1, 2 pieces developed, 1, 2 pieces, but I castled. I have pawns already in the center. I'm ready to push almost. And yeah, I'm ahead definitely, so I'm planning to open up the game. But here I didn't see a clear way to open, but f5 would have been the best move according to Ripka. And I was afraid of something like pawn takes, whichever pawn takes, well, rather the g pawn, not to open the e file where the king is still stuck. So if pawn takes, I was kind of afraid that my opponent now can make sense of the bishop and try to exchange it. This knight would be quite in a pin, because this bishop is very valuable. Here e5 would make sense to keep the e-file locked as long as black hasn't castled. Then knight c3. Well, this is one of the best lines against this line of where black takes with the g pawn here. So this is what the computer suggests. For example, knight d7, and after the bishop comes out, black develops. But queen e2 is very strong here, and the idea is that after queen e7 you can take on e5. And sometimes this fianchetto, this counter fianchetto in the Bird's Leningrad variation shows his downsides. Now there are pieces hanging. White just grabbed a pawn in the center. the bishop is hanging, and the best moves are actually here. The best move is something like queen takes e5, queen takes e5, but I mean, you just exchange and then you win a piece. And if bishop takes g2, queen takes, and the rook is still hanging, that's the point. After castles to cover the rook on a8, knight c6 is very annoying, and I mean, this is of course simply winning. You exchange the pieces and now you open up the game. It's very clear that white emerges a piece up, sorry, not a piece up, but material ahead. White has 2 pawns more, and after consolidation with c3, the pawn on b2 is covered. So this scheme of breaking in the center early with f5 just works because of this of the bishop here, which is loose. After f5, which was again the best move but not the game continuation, the best move could be queen d7, then takes, and knight g5 would be the follow-up. And the idea is of course to weaken black center and the pawns and make use of them with the bishop as well. And we have an open f-file, and we have to be quick. Now if knight h6 to stop rook f7, bishop h3, bishop d4 check, and after knight f5, now you see that I cannot grab this because of the bishop. The pawn is pinned. We kick the bishop back, go back, and get out of the pin. h4, trying to activate the rook, get some counterplay, but this is actually a winning position for white if played correctly. g4 here, not to allow takes, and then the bishop could be hanging if takes here, so g4 takes, knight h6 to stop rook f7 again, and the knight was attacked this time. Bishop e3, pushing the g pawn, knight f7, knight d8. Really, this pawn is very loose. Knight a3, queen g7, and now the knight is rerouting to d4. And if e5 kind of close things up, well, you get some exchanges, yes, but black cannot castle anyhow. Even here you can exchange this, and rook f6. That's the point of pushing the pawn to g5. And if rook comes here, we can even attack this loose rook. So it's at all a bad position, a losing position for black. And that's the reason why f5 is the best move here. But again, from the principal point of view, I was afraid of exchanging these bishops, so I didn't do that, and it turned out it would have been best, and black would have a bad game. So I played queen e1 because now, due to e6, there's a queen looking at h4, and now h4 could be stronger. So I'm frustrating black's plan, and now my queen is vis-a-vis the black king, and f5 now should be stronger because I would maybe take with check here or something. Okay, my opponent played knight c6, and now that the bishop's diagonal is blocked for the time being, I can push f5. Knight d4. The knight on d4 is threatening this fork of queen and rook. This is what you have to consider. And you can always play queen f2 and cover the pawn. You can also play knight a3, cover the pawn. But I don't want to have my knight exchanged here, actually. Okay. I took on g6, trying to open up the game. I mean, if I would have played knight pawn takes here, the knight could have retreated even and have a comfortable game. I didn't want to give him this option, so I played takes on g6. Now he has to recapture with the pawn, and now I have these loose pawns as I wanted. Knight g5 here turns out is not strongest, but it's very complicated, it's very messy, and it's not easy at all. Here the engine would consider this move as a mistake, but this is very hard to prove for black. For example, my opponent played bishop f6 here, and now white is immediately better. If knight takes, this is the critical move, then the computer starts to correct itself and say, okay, the position is rather equal. Queen e2 would be best here. Maybe, it's not so clear. And if takes, e5, opening up the game. If takes, the queen is kind of bound to cover the rook here because of the queen. And the pawn here is hanging. The knight is out of the game. If king d7, there is not king d7. King d7 would fail to rook f7 check and takes. So if d5, trying to lock things up, we would take on e6, fork the queen and bishop. After queen d7, check takes, and now takes here, and this is losing for black. Rook here, check. If king e7, we have this terrible check here. If rook here, we have e6, check, and this is just winning. So we looked at knight takes c2, and queen e2 would be one very good move here. But what about knight takes e6? Immediately counterattacking black's queen, and of course the bishop is hanging as well with check. Queen e7, queen f2, getting out of the attack. And now if takes, then takes. If knight takes a1, bishop h3, holding on to the strong knight, black cannot castle. h4 to open up things for the black rook. Takes is even possible. If bishop f6 here, because it was hanging. Bishop g5. Well, it was not hanging, but it was attacked. And yeah, it's one of the best moves here. So takes, check, check, takes. Now the black king has lost his right to castle. Knight h6 to cover the f7 square, and knight e6 back. Knight f7. So black is trying to castle here somehow, or find some counterplay, but he can't. The knight on e6 is a monster, and here again a check, and the king has to step aside. If queen takes here, then the rook hangs. So king d8, and this is crushing. So let's drop back. Knight g5 is a very strong move, and you have to prove with black that black would be better. I think Ripka is overestimating black's position here and black's attack against the rook. So my opponent played bishop f6, and this is even worse for black. Now I have to keep black at in check in a way, but I don't have a check right now. So queen f2 now covers c2 for the time being. It adds pressure to the f file. It monitors the knight and sets up a lot of threats, as you will see. Now the point is, the bishop can never take. This knight is attacked twice by black, but the bishop can never take because there's mate on f7. So this is the main idea of queen f2. You always have to look for moves which get the most juice out for you from the fruit. So you have covered, you have monitored, you're monitoring this and adding pressure and threatening mate if the bishop moves ever. And you keep your strong knight on g5. And now my opponent should have played a move to kind of stay solid. He played queen e7, and this is the losing move of the game. Can you see what's the strongest move here? The second strongest move would be just simply to kick the knight, control d4, so there is no bishop pins the queen. So c3 is very useful, but here you have a clearly winning move. The winning move, if you want to pause the video, do it right now. And the winning move is e5. Now you see again the bishop hanging. Right behind it, the rook. The queen doesn't defend the rook. The pawn attacks also the bishop. The bishop doesn't defend the knight anymore. And the pawn, if it is allowed to take here, threatens the queen. So I'm threatening a lot, and black is only threatening this knight, and to exchange on g2, threatening my rook. But I have stronger threats. My pawn would threaten the queen, and my bishop would threaten the rook, and would in some lines threaten a check towards the king. And I can always kick the knight or take it even. So there's more material hanging for black, and this is a super strong move here, e5. Let's just drop back. This is the reason why after queen f2, e5 would have been a very good reply, maybe the only reply here. Let's see what the engine would say. Okay, the engine also suggests the tactical solution, check. If queen takes, now you can take here because the piece is attacked twice, and now you exchanged pieces here, and the game is okay for black. Let's drop back. after knight e2 check, there's also king h1, and now h4 must be the follow-up. This is quite complicated. If we would just take the knight, bishop takes here, and now black seems to get an attack. So after knight e2, best is just to take it, and the other move is e5, very solid, stopping my pawn from moving. You see the pieces are just very uncomfortable in some lines, and e5 just solves all these problems. Then best would be knight c3, something like this, developing, maybe provoking some exchanges here. That's good for white, giving the white knight a new square, lengthening white's bishop's diagonal, and monitoring the light squares where black wants a castle. And we can just push pawns here. For example, castle's long, knight e4, rook f8, bishop g5. The rook is hanging, so there is no bishop takes. If knight f5, we can take the nice bishop and push a4. White has the bishop pair, and I think black's king is less safe. But the game is roughly equal here. It would be a game, at least, for black. But queen e7 loses to e5, and all the pieces are hanging. Pawn takes, bishop takes, rook d8, knight e4. Of course, in this position, I have to think about retreating the bishop someday and rescue it. If black pushes c5, the bishop would be attacked by the queen. And I don't want to have to retreat the bishop to a less ideal diagonal. And it would add some protection to my king. At the moment, I'm a piece up. But if I play knight e4, I'm attacking his bishop 3 times with check. And if I take this with check, I can still retreat my bishop. Now he played c6. I took with check, he took with the queen. And now, of course, you can exchange queens. You exchange pieces, and you're a piece up, so you exchange material and enjoy your extra piece. But I don't want to develop his knight. I don't want to pull his knight out. And there are many moves here. There's even bishop takes. And if knight takes, there's queen g2, and now there are 2 pieces hanging. What I played was a typical move for me. I played the bishop out. I want to exchange the knight, and then I want to take with check, and later maybe sink my bishop here, where it would look down the board, and cut black's position in pieces. He took my queen, and I took with the rook. Of course, I need to protect the c2 pawn here. I don't want to lose my rook. So I didn't take with the bishop. Now king d7. And what black is planning here is king c7, bishop back, b5, and the bishop is locked. and afterwards king b6 and takes on a6. To anticipate this plan, I firstly took the knight and played a4. a4 with the idea, if king here, bishop here, now b5 doesn't work because I would just take, and there would be a pawn dropping for black, and my rook would defend the bishop. So a4 anticipates this. My bishop is rescued. Let's just drop back. Rook f7 is an even stronger move, and I thought of it. If knight e7 takes with check, king takes, this would be very good as well. But I chose this route here. a4, knight e7, bishop a6. What I want to do is, I see that my opponent wants to sink his knight in here, and I want to exchange this knight with this. But before I do that, I want to get my bishop back. So it's kind of slow for white, but there's nothing to worry about in this position for white. Knight f5, bishop c4, bishop c4 now, as long as there is no knight on e3, the c4 square is okay for the bishop. And now that the knight comes in, I can retreat, and takes, check. Now here you gotta be cautious. You cannot play king e2 simply because knight g4 would be strong, threatening rook f2 check. And knight takes h2. But still that should be winning somehow. But rook f1 is one of the suggestions of Ripka's, and if takes, then you just lose a pawn for nothing. So after this rook check, king g1 is strongest, which I played. My opponent tried to play on, I mean, this is of course ridiculous, but okay. I want to exchange the knight. Takes. He played rook f3, and I played so fast that I didn't even see this fork. I mean, I saw the fork idea before, and when he played it, I missed it. I don't know why. I just saw my plan of exchanging the knight, and I didn't even bother looking at the position. Now he blundered. He took the pawn with check, and I just rescued my piece. And I mean, it was over from move 13 already. Let's just very quickly look at the opening. I played f4, and with his counter fianchetto idea, I just stuck to my setup. And h4, we talked about this. e4, letting this bishop stare at a pawn. Sorry. e6, and now f5 would have been best. It's a good move because of principles. You can find such moves, but I preferred playing differently and got to the same idea more or less. And here I just took, and if takes, knight here. Let's just drop back. If knight takes f3 here, then you can, for example, take with the rook. If pawn takes, now you can go on developing your pieces. Let's see, queen f2 wouldn't be as good because of knight here and here. So let's say knight c3, and then at some point black should try to get developed, maybe here, to give the knight the opportunity to come here, maybe. If bishop g5, yeah, maybe. I think knight e7 looks bad here. Well, it's possible. It's possible. It's an uncomfortable pin after the castles, but it's not a problem. So if something like this, I wonder how about castles now. But okay, rook f7 would be bothering and annoying again. So it's not so easy. You see that white has a lot of play due to the open f-file. And, well, black recaptured here anyway. And you see this knight g5 is just looking at these weak squares. This is also weak. And that happens if you don't castle and get developed. I hope you got something out of this video. Please comment it. And this video was more to show you how to play rather than showing you a perfect game. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye bye.